Breaking news, the first AP poll is out, and Alabama is first yet again. They have been ranked number one in the AP poll 5 of the past 7 seasons. Ohio State is 2, defending champion Georgia comes in at 3, and Clemson, after a down season last year, number 4 in the preseason AP poll. That is exactly how the preseason coaches poll was. Bama 1, Ohio State 2, Georgia 3, and Clemson 4. Let's dive into it. Chris Hassell joined by Dennis Dodd. Dennis, no surprise here at the top. I know that people like to argue, but I can't imagine many are arguing with Alabama at number 1 with what they return.
No, you mentioned how often they've been preseason number 1, 5 the last 7. They were the only team in the CFP era to go wire-to-wire preseason number 1 to championship in 2017, where Tua's overtime pass to Devontae Smith, and they're absolutely loaded. You know, this was supposed to be the year where they won it all. Well, a gap year, I call it. In 2021, they came within 10 minutes of winning a national championship, won the SEC, and just barely lost to Georgia again in that championship game. And they know they're loaded. That 2020 team, Chris, had those 6 first-round draft choice. Again, last year was supposed to be a rebuilding year. Look at the players they've got now. Arguably the best offensive player in the country, Bryce Young. The best defensive player, Will Anderson Jr., edge rusher being compared to Derek Thomas, the best comp at Alabama, one of the all-time linebacker edge rushers at Alabama. And a whole bunch of new names. Got a little bit banged up at the receiver position, but I think if there's one thing for sure, Chris, Alabama's always going to have receivers.
Brady Quinn sat on our CBS Sports HQ set last year around this time and said, not only is Bryce Young going to win the Heisman this year, he is going to win it multiple years in college. Now, he won it last year. Not the favorite to win it this year because voters tend to maybe pull back a little bit for voting for somebody that won it the year before. But what does Bryce Young have to do to win it again this year?
Yeah, Chris, I think you hit it on the head. I think just the fact that the voters tend not to go back-to-back, obviously, Archie Griffin's the only back-to-back in 74, 75. What does he have to do to win it? I think much of the same as he did last year, 4,000 yards passing, maybe win the championship this year, but that's not going to have an impact. Remember that on the Heisman voting. He's going to be surrounded by a bevy of great receivers. The big concern about Alabama is their offensive line. They had 41 sacks last year. I keep saying, having watched Alabama a bunch, that number would have been 60 had not Bryce Young been back there with his mobility. So he's going to help maybe a weak to average offensive line coming back. As for winning the Heisman, I think C.J. Stroud should be the favorite right now. I think a lot of people think that, Vegas included, just based on what he did late last year. He started off throwing 7 touchdown passes in the first 2 games. That included the loss to Oregon, and people are kind of down on him. But he didn't play bad. As the season got on, he was fantastic. Obviously, 6 touchdowns against Utah in the Rose Bowl. I think he's the favorite to watch. And again, just because the voters tend not to go back-to-back, it's going to be tough for Bryce Young.
Alabama got 54 first-place votes. Ohio State coming in at number 2 with 6 first-place votes. Georgia with 3. Is the gap greater from Alabama down to Ohio State or Ohio State down to Georgia, in your opinion?
I think the gap is from the top 3 to the field. I've said this the whole offseason. You can easily pick those top 3 in whatever order you want. And Alabama probably deserves to be number 1. But to get a 4th team, a 5th team, and say, yeah, that's the next that's the 4th playoff team that ought to be in there. Now, both the coaches and AP have picked Clemson. That's fine. But Clemson won 10 games last year and was offensively inept at times. They were hard to watch offensively. Now, they're a lot better, and their defense is elite this year. But DJ Uiagalelei has to show me the promise that he's had since he got on campus, and we just didn't see it last year, whether he was distracted by NIL, whether a lot of it went to his head, whether there wasn't a supporting cast around him. We don't know, but he has to come through. What do they say these days, Chris? If you have a quarterback, you have a chance. And if Clemson has a chance to be in that playoff, DJ Uiagalelei has to play well.
So Clemson's 4, Notre Dame is 5, and then it's Texas A&M at number 6. A&M beat Alabama last season, but did not finish the season ranked in the AP poll. Then it's Utah at 7, a team that we have number 4 in our preseason CBS Sports rankings. You say the big gap is from 3 to the rest of the field. Who right now would be your pick as the 4th team to maybe be the front runner for the college football playoff this year?
Yeah, Utah was number 4 for me when we sent in our ballots, mostly because they look like that team that has built itself to this point. I compare it to like a San Diego State, which may be taken in by the Pac-12 here pretty soon. But Utah has spent 15 years under Kyle Whittingham getting to this point, finally winning the Pac-12, almost beating Ohio State, playing Ohio State to its knees, leading them by 2 touchdowns in the first half. And Cam Rising is one of those fire starter quarterbacks who puts the team on his back and wins. It's a very physical team. I think they could compete in any conference in the country and come out successful. Now, the problem, Chris, is they have to go to Florida for the opener. But I think Florida, in a state of transition with a new coach, I think Utah's got a heck of a chance. And they have a chance to be in the top 4. I'm not saying they're a slam dunk, but that's the team I came up with. It's almost a process of elimination. I can't go Texas A&M because they've got those 8 5-stars, but how many of those guys are going to come through? How many of those guys have to come through? And I've still got quarterback issues with Texas A&M. You mentioned Texas. They're not going to be in the top 4, and they got a first-place vote. Where are they going to be? So I think a good, solid pick right now in a very fluctuating Pac-12 is Utah. You could see them going 11-1. They get USC at home and then playing that big that Pac-12 championship game.
Yeah, it's been a while since the Pac-12 has had a team in the college football playoff. Most years they do not have one, but Utah appears to be in a pretty decent spot. If they can go to Florida in the season opener and win that game, Utah would have a chance to do that. So you've got Utah at 7 and Oregon at 11. Those are the 2 highest ranked Pac-12 teams. For the Big 12, Dennis, it's Oklahoma at 9 and Baylor at 10. How do you compare the Pac-12 and the Big 12 going into this season?
I think the Big 12 is going to be pretty good. They are similar. You're right. It looks like 2 leagues that their best team is going to have 2 losses by November 1st. And that's what's plagued the Pac-12 these last 7 years since they've last been in the college football playoff. But this year they look like very similar teams, very similar conferences in that they don't have that slam dunk dominant team. I can shoot through holes through Oklahoma because they didn't win it last year. They've got a brand new coach, Brent Venables, who's never been a head coach. It was the right pick. It was a great pick. But again, until we see it on the field, Dylan Gabriel comes in as an import quarterback from UCF. The defense we know is going to be better because it's Brent Venables. But can they get through that league, which will be long forgotten by the time realignment is done, is the only league to play a true round robin. They play everybody else. You skip no one. So I think Oklahoma's right there. I really like Baylor. I had Baylor in my top 4 for a while. They lose a bunch of players, but they have a great coach. Dave Aranda, I think what he did with the quarterback situation in the spring, naming a starter and letting Gary Bohannon transfer, was brilliant. He had all these months now to tailor that starter to get ready. He played well in the championship game last year. I think Baylor's going to be a team that's going to compete for the playoff and maybe be the dominant team in the Big 12 going forward because of Aranda as long as he stays there. Again, physical, recruiting well, drafting off Matt Rule, what he did a few years ago. So I really like Baylor. I think it's, 1, 2, 3, Oklahoma State. Don't forget they played for the championship as well.
All right, let's take a look at the top 10 in the AP poll, which was released at noon Eastern time today. Really no surprise at all. The top 3, that's going to be the top 3 in pretty much every preseason ranking there is. Most of the cachet we put into the AP poll. That's the poll that we go by until the college football playoff rankings. You have Clemson 4, Notre Dame 5, and mentioned a few of those teams that round out the top 10. Want to give this note, Dennis. We've had the college football playoff for 8 years. All 8 teams to win the CFP were ranked in the top 6 in the AP preseason poll. That would be Bama, Ohio State, Georgia, Clemson, Notre Dame, and Texas A&M. We haven't talked about Notre Dame at all, and it's odd when you have a team like Notre Dame, one of the biggest brands in college football, ranked that high, yet I have not heard, Dennis, many people say that they're a legit playoff and maybe title contender. Where are the Fighting Irish going into the season in your mind?
Yeah, that's a great thought, Chris, because I have the same thought. I think they're there that high because of their brand. Again, you're talking about a first-time head coach, and I love Marcus Freeman. I think the world of him. I think he's going to be great. But going into that first game at Ohio State, a 2-touchdown underdog, and I hate to bring this up every time I do, the history of first-time head coaches at Notre Dame is not good. I don't have to tell you about Jerry Faust and others there. I think Tyler Buchner was just, obviously he was just named the starting quarterback. They need him because of his legs, because Notre Dame just lost its best receiver to an ACL. They're going to rely a lot on the tight end, Michael Mayer, whether he gets enough explosive plays to move that team down the field. But they were better offensively last year with Kyron Williams. Tommy Rees is going to have a heck of a year. But I think this is a team that down the road, 2, 3, 4, 5 with Marcus Freeman, I just don't see them that high this year, especially. Look at the schedule. Everybody wants to talk about them playing a Big Ten schedule if they go there. Look at the schedule this year. It's monstrous. They're a 2 or 3 loss team to me.
Seems like we get the same teams in the college football playoff every single year, right? Alabama, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Georgia, Notre Dame. The year with LSU, sure. But last year we got a bit of a surprise. In the Michigan Wolverines, I know Michigan, the all-time winningest program in college football history, but they're the only team to be unranked in the preseason AP poll and make the college football playoff. Dennis, if you had to take a team right now, maybe outside the top 10 in the preseason poll that could challenge for the CFP, like Michigan did last season, from being unranked all the way into the top 4, who might that team be this season?
I thought you were going to go with the group of 5 team, and that would be Houston for me, but I don't think they can challenge for the top 4. I don't think that's going to be Houston this year, but I do think they're going to get a New Year's Day bowl. North Carolina State, I was writing about them and talking about them the other day. I think they're underrated with 9 wins last year. Devin Leary has a Heisman campaign going. Dave Doran is just a guy that continues to win 9 every year. The defense is a little bit nicked up, but they've got Peyton Wilson, one of their linebackers, had problems staying on the field, but 2 years ago led them in tackles. If they beat Clemson, obviously that's going to be tough, but they did last year, and that's, I think that's the thing that gives them hope. They could be that team lurking on the outside. You mentioned teams, the same old teams getting in. I think it's only been 13 teams in the 8-year history of the CFP that's gotten in. And last year, here are your Cinderellas. Michigan became the team to come from the furthest back to ever make the playoff. In the preseason, they got 12 votes. They were 32nd out of the top 25, and they made the CFP. Cincinnati, who was a darling coming in, obviously, to contend, was 8th. So they didn't come from that far behind. So what are we talking about with North Carolina State? They're in the top 12, top 15. I think they could make a run.
NC State is 13th in the preseason AP poll. Right behind them, the USC Trojans, a team, a sexy pick to win in the first year of Lincoln Riley there with Caleb Williams at quarterback. What do you see for the Trojans this season, coming in from the teens?
Boy,
in the preseason?
This is fascinating, Chris, because I've been inside USC this summer and been there a couple of times. People are openly talking about a 4-8 team winning the Pac-12. Now, I don't think that's outrageous. I think that could happen. But that's a huge ask. That's getting to the point where you're talking about one of the biggest turnarounds in college football history. Hawaii still owns that mark. In 1999, they went 12-0. They were, I think, 4-9 the year before, an 8.5 game improvement. I don't know if I see that from USC. They've got to prove to me that they're physical enough. Even the great Pete Carroll teams that won Heisman were very, very physical defensively and offensively. And then when they go to the run and shoot the last couple of years, and then before that, not before that right now, Mike Leach's offense, the air raid, we'll see how that goes. They've got talent all over the field, but they're going to have to stop somebody. And a team that has to outscore everybody has to be elite at every position. Alabama did that 2 years ago, and they don't mind saying that. That wasn't a great defensive team, but they outscored everybody, and they got a little bit better defensively as time went on. The new USC the new USC coach flipped the roster in a time of 6 weeks. 43 out of the 85 players are new on scholarship. So that's going to be something they have to not only profit from, but overcome. So can it happen at USC? Absolutely, but it's more of a show me thing.
Well, let's show you the last 5 teams into the AP preseason top 25. You mentioned the group of 5, and you have 3 of them coming in to round out the poll. Those are the 3 highest ranked group of 5 teams, Cincinnati, Houston, and BYU at 23, 24, and 25 respectively. But Dennis, this is the last year that they're going to be group of 5 teams. All 3 of those teams joined the Big 12 after this season. And you mentioned Houston as a team that you think could be that group of 5 darling this season.
Yeah, I love Houston to go undefeated or 11-1, something like that in the American. They're loaded like Cincinnati was last year. They've got the quarterback in Clayton Tune. They've got the game-breaking receiver in Nathaniel Dell, and a guy, assistant coach, no one is talking about. Doug Belk, who used to be an Alabama staffer, has built really an elite defense at a place that hasn't played any, in a while. Great defense at Houston. They were last year. They're going to be very good this year. If they get past the Texas Tech game early, I think they can make a run. There's no one on their schedule they can't beat. And if you look really hard, you can really see a 12-0 team out there. And then they, I don't know if they compete for the top 4. I doubt it, but Cincinnati started at 8. I just told you Michigan was receiving votes and got in. Why can't Houston come from 24 and get into the top 4?
All right, Dennis Dodd on the preseason release of the Associated Press Top 25. Dennis, thank you. We hit on a bunch of teams. Let's run through them all right now, 1 through 10. Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia. Dennis says there's a big gap between the top 3 teams and everybody else. Who is that 4th team going to be? Clemson is 4, Notre Dame is 5. You got A&M, Jimbo Fisher. They got to go to Alabama this season in early October. Dennis thinks it might be Utah. Dennis has Utah as the 4th best team in the country. They are the co-favorites out there in the Pac-12 along with USC. Michigan made the playoff last year. They're at 8. The highest ranked Big 12 teams are at 9 and 10, Oklahoma and Baylor respectively. Into the teens, that's where you find another Pac-12 and another Big 12 team. Oregon at 11, Oklahoma State at 12. A lot of love for NC State going into this season. Lincoln Riley starting off his USC tenure number 14 in the land. Miami, a lot of talent down there. We'll see what they can do. Wisconsin is in the top 20 along with Arkansas. Had a great year last year. Can they keep it going? Kentucky, basketball school or not. Football program is in the top 20. And rounding out the top 25 is when we find our first group of 5 teams, Cincinnati, Houston, and BYU, 23, 24, and 25. The AP poll is out. Week 0 is just around the corner. It'll kick off a week from Saturday. The Cover 3 podcast has you covered the whole way. The guys ramping up. Latest episode on quarterback battles, and there are a bunch of them. Some of them among the best teams in the country, like Texas A&M.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.